Now, we're going to be talking about high-resolution audio, and we'll go just deep enough that you guys can have a solid understanding of what digital audio, essentially, our ears are analog devices, and sound is an analog concept. And so anytime we try to convert the music that we hear, the sounds that we enjoy, into ones and zeros, it's a process of compromise. Now, there's a reason that you don't find any high-resolution recordings of Taylor Swift, any high-resolution recordings of Deadmau5. The recordings that you can purchase are recordings that have been digitally recorded from their analog masters. Now, I'm a huge fan of, like the Ampex ATR 124 or the Studio A800, and if you want to ensure that you lose nothing, you don't have to look any further than a really high-end reel-to-reel. But digital, over the years, has many advantages that its analog counterparts don't. Mainly, the ability to edit and distribute so much easier than analog. So it is necessary and it is beneficial to convert analog sounds to ones and zeros. It's necessary to take some of those compromises because, at the end of the day, the benefits outweigh the compromises. But if anytime we talk about converting analog sound to digital sounds, we are talking about a compromise process. Now, there are two things that we concern ourselves with anytime we convert analog sound to digital sound. Those two things are the sample rate and the bit depth. Now, let's take a look at a typical audio wave. Now, this is just a screen cap I took out of Audacity. We can see that it peaks up and downs. Those represent the amplitude of the wave, and how often the wave occurs, how many of cycles there are. That's what's known as the frequency of the wave. So when we talk about a sample rate, we're literally just saying how often are we taking a measurement of this waveform. And so if we took the measurement 10 times in a second, then the sample rate would be 10 hertz. If we take the sample 1,000 times in a second, then the sample rate would be 1 kilohertz or 1,000 hertz. And if we take the sample 44,000 times in a second, the sample rate would be 44 kilohertz. Now, the second thing we're interested in is the bit depth. And the bit depth is quite simply how much information we are taking every time we take a measurement. And so imagine, if you will, that you had a ruler with 44,000 lines on it. In other words, you had the ability to measure something in increments of 44,000. If the bit depth is 16, then you'll be able to gather 16 bits of information every time you take a measurement of those 44,000 times in a given second. So the sample rate is how often, the bit depth is how much. It's basically that simple. Well, that begs the question, how often do we want to sample something, and how much information should we gather every time we take a sample? And for that, we look to something called the Nyquist theorem. And the Nyquist theorem basically states, in order to accurately reproduce a digital signal from its analog counterpart, it needs to be periodically sampled at a rate that is twice the highest frequency you wish to record. Well, Noah, what is the highest frequency that we wish to record? And for that, we look no further than the human ear. The human ear can hear 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz, also known as 20 kilohertz. Now, if we apply the Nyquist theorem here and say that the highest frequency we would ever want to sample is 20 kilohertz, then that's the highest frequency our ears can hear. And that's the sample that we want to sample somewhere above 40 kilohertz, because it's 20 times 2, 40 kilohertz. And thus we sample at 44.1 kilohertz. And yes, before anyone writes me hate mail, I am fully aware of the Sony F1, but it's not pertinent to this discussion. So we're just going to say that we'll just leave it at the sample rate has to exceed twice the highest frequency that you want to capture. Now, all commercial CDs are mastered at a bit depth of 16 bits with a sample rate of 44.1 kilohertz. A bit depth of 16 gives us 96 decibels of dynamic range, which is enough for everything we want to capture. And this is where I have to start asking questions. Or is it? Because if you think about a drum set, for example, the dynamic difference between a wooden stick tapping a side stick against the rim of a snare drum, and now think about an 18-inch A Zildjian crash and the swell of that, how much louder is that crash going to be than the click of the stick? And is the difference between those two greater than 96 decibels? And if we're going to ask that question, then we have to ask, is 44.1 kilohertz frequent enough of a sampling rate? So if we go back to our ruler example, for argument's sake, let's just say instead of 44,000 lines, we had 2,822,400 lines. Obviously, we'd get a much finer measurement. And that's what we're talking about when we talk about measurements and how accurate they are. If we have such a high concentration of measurements, if we take them very, very often, we only need 1 bit depth because the waveform can't change that much in one, 2,822,400th of a second. And this is how we arrive at high resolution audio, because high resolution audio, and it can be traditionally FLAC or wave or something we're going to be talking about called DSD, also known as direct stream digital. And I want to bring Dr. Chelliah up here. Let's see. Are you still with me?
Yes, I am here. No, I'm here.
Okay, yes. So I want to get your take. So you and I were talking the other night about this, and you were saying you were giving me math. Yeah, please.
Can I add a little bit of an explanation that might help some of the listeners? You see, if you're measuring a length of a string or a piece of a small little pin, for example, length of a pin, if you use a ruler with just 10 divisions and the needle comes between 2 divisions, then you have to approximate. You see, you have to take it to the... And that is the problem with not having an accurate scale. Suppose if you have many divisions, you can do. Now, this is what gets you when you have the bit depth. When you say 16 bits, the more bits you have, you can have more, it's like a scale with my smaller divisions.
Right.
And also, it gives you the dynamic range you talked about. So I just want to add my 2 pieces in there. Okay.
Yeah, and so give me the math that you were talking about the other night. We were talking about this, and you were saying if you just disregard the bit depth for a second, just talk about sample rate. If you take a 20, you were given math on how many times you're going to sample a given cycle.
Okay, let's take an example of the highest frequency, 20 kilohertz. Okay, so let's take a sine wave. So it goes up, down, and below, and up again. So you have, if you're sampling at a rate of only 40 kilohertz, you get only 2 samples, one up and one down. Okay? Mm-hmm. Therefore, now, theoretically speaking, there are other problems, I'm sure other ideas Bob will address. But theoretically, since you have only 2 points of reference, you don't know whether this wave is a sine wave or a triangular wave,
right,
or a rectangular, a square wave. You have no way of knowing that. Okay?
Right.
But of course, they do some really sophisticated computer algorithm to try and figure this out. For example, we know that the highest frequency we can hear is only 20 kilohertz. We don't need to hear anything higher than that. So what they do, one of the tricks they use in digital audio is have a very, very strong brick wall filter. In other words, they filter everything about 22 kilohertz.
Right.
Which means, and Fourier analysis. Fourier was a French mathematician who said that all waveforms, even complex waveforms, are nothing but a sine wave and a series of it's a harmonic sine wave, like 100, 200, 300. And so working backwards, a square wave is nothing but a sine wave plus a whole bunch of extra multiples, like 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, and so on. So they're saying, the computer technology people, the audio people are saying, well, okay, my problem is I only have 2 reference points. I don't know whether it's a sine wave or a rectangular wave.
Right, and we're forcing the computer to guess. And we'll dive into the nitty gritty on sampling and filters and stuff. I do want to get to that because I think that's an important part of the discussion. But I want to go back and I want to touch on FLAC for just a second. If you haven't heard of FLAC, first, a disclaimer and a reminder that in the digital world, there's no such thing as a truly lossless format, because everything we're sampling, even if we're sampling it 2.8 million times in a second, there's, our ears are listening constantly. And so that's 2.8 million is still not constant. But with that said, when we refer to a lossless codec, what we're saying is that nothing that the human ear is scientifically capable of detecting is lost. And so FLAC is a lossless format, meaning that none of the data from the source recording is compressed or removed, assuming that you use the same bit depth and frequency range. But FLAC, unlike WAVE, and WAVE is another lossless format, FLAC is technically superior for a couple of reasons. The first is FLAC does everything that WAVE does in terms of lossless audio, but in smaller packages. WAVE is an insanely inefficient way to encode audio. The second thing that FLAC does very, very well is it has more tagging capabilities, which makes it, which Windows, by the way, doesn't respect. And so if you're going to choose a format for archiving or and you want more tags and less space, then go with FLAC every time. And we can use FLAC to store audio at high resolution. That's kind of what we're talking about today is, can we store audio in the best possible format? And FLAC is capable of storing audio in 24-bit 96 kilohertz, which is obviously, if you're paying attention, we've gone from 16 bits to 24, and we've gone from 44 to 96, and you can actually go all the way up to 196. With most of them. And so if 16 bits can do 96 decibels of dynamic range, then 24 bits can do 144 decibels of dynamic range. And again, I've got some questions for Bob Carver when we get to him, but there is a new format, and this is the one that I have personally been playing with, and it's called DSD. And what DSD is, Direct Stream Digital, is basically, we take just one bit. It's a very shallow bit depth, but we sample at an insanely high rate. So we sample at 2.8 megahertz, 2.8. So that's 2,800 kilohertz for reference. And that, the first time I listened to DSD audio, you guys, it blew my mind. It was so fantastic. And I've got a graph up here that shows the difference. If you're not watching the show on visual playback, then maybe head over to YouTube and check out this particular graph, because it's really, I think it exemplifies the difference between DSD and WAVE audio. But DSD just brings it home for me, and that really is what struck off this entire conversation. And later on in the conversation, we're going to talk about how you can get this working on Linux, what equipment do you need to do all of this, all that coming up later on the show, plus the interview with Bob Carver. Again, phone lines are open, 1-855-450-NOAH. That's 855-450-6624. Hey, Dad, you want to take some calls with me?
Sure.
Great. We'll start with Jeff. Jeff is calling from Ohio. Hey, Jeff, welcome to the Ask Noah Show.
Hey, Noah. How you doing today?
Excellent. How can we help?
Well, I work in an IT company, and they sent out a communication last week, 2 weeks ago, about if you have AMD and Intel chips, you must think about upgrading your processor because of Meltdown. Now, me being an IT guy, like I am, I know Meltdown was only for Intel and Spectre.
Number one. Number two, upgrading your chip isn't going to fix anything. There is no hardware fix available yet.
Yeah, that's the one thing I thought. But I made a reply, and I said, well, you're basically saying that both of these chips are affected by the same thing, which it's not. And number two, you got to break it down to what you're talking about, because there might be some people who don't know a thing about chips. They might think that their CPU is their GPU. And if you sit there and you continue to say, well, you need to update your chips or update the kernel chips or update whatever, what do you think people are going to think? Well, oh, my God, I got to rip out my processor and put a new processor in it.
Right. Which, and not only are we not, even if you ripped out your processor today, not only is that not going to solve the problem, if you rip out your processor a year from now or 2 years from now, it still might not solve the problem, because we are going to be living with this particular vulnerability for the next couple of years, for the next couple of cycles of Intel processors. So, yeah, I mean...
Yeah, even AMD processors with Spectre, because it's harder to get to and to actually to use the vulnerability.
Right. Well, it has to be done.
There's a lot of people who don't understand.
Yeah. Well, it has to be done in software. So.
Yeah, but see, that's what I'm saying. A lot of people don't understand the difference between what is actually happening with Meltdown and what is actually happening with Spectre.
Yeah.
They lump. If you have AMD and Intel, you're affected by Meltdown, or if you have AMD and Intel, you're affected by Spectre. They need to differentiate.
Yes.
what?
Yes, I agree.
How would you go about?
Well, what I do for the very non-technical folks is, and I mean really non-technical. So I don't know if I would go into my boss's office if I was working, if I worked for an IT firm, and I would use this analogy. But if I'm using very non-technical folks, I ask a question where I know where I can predict to it with a relative degree of certainty what the answer in their head is going to be, and then I use that as an example of saying, because I can guess that if I ask, if for instance, if we just ate lunch and I say, "Are you hungry?" And I can say, now my prediction is that you're going to say no. And they say, yeah, of course it's no. I say, okay. And then I use that as a segue to say, okay, this is how the processor does these things. And let's just pretend that the area in your brain where you said no was unsecured. And let's also pretend that sometimes instead of just thinking yes or no, you think about your passwords, and I could steal those. And that analogy works really, really well because you set it up in such a way where you say, I have to have physical access. I have to be sitting in front of you. I can't read your mind from across the, at least that we know of, across the world or whatever. And also there would be no log of me reading your mind, so we don't know if this attack has ever been used. Because that's one thing that gets missed in the discussion about Spectre and Meltdown, right? Is that it doesn't leave any traces. So everyone's going around saying, "Oh, this isn't a big deal. We don't have any record of it happening." Well, yeah, because there's no log in the file, So that's what I do. But I tell you what, I will do you one better, Jeff. If you'd like, if you think it would help you, I would love to put together like a little 2-minute video, and we put it up on our YouTube channel. And if you want, I can put you back on hold, have Sarah pick up. She can take your call details, and we can get that. We could get you a link, and you could just take that video and say, here are some people that this is what they do, day in and day out, is they explain technology. Here's an explanation for you of what the, just.
That would be wonderful.
Great. I'll go ahead and put you back on hold, Jeff, and Sarah will pick up, and we'll get that video produced sometime later this week, and we'll get a link out for you. You can get that to your boss. Max is calling. Hey, Max, from Indianapolis. Hey, I didn't click on the thing. Hey, Max, welcome to the Ask Noah Show.
Hey, Noah, thanks for having me on.
Yes, sir. How can we help?
Yeah, I have some questions about lighting controls. I understand you install those at Altispeed, and I'm wondering what products you use to automate lighting.
Sure. So we use a product, we use a combination of products. We use a combination of products from a lighting control company called Lutron, who makes the light switches. And we use automation systems from a company called Crestron, which makes control systems. And the nice thing is you can tie those lighting control systems into the automation system, and then the automation system can tie to a bunch of other systems. So you can tie it to security systems, you can tie it to a smartphone, you can tie it to, I was talking with Chris the other night about the way I have my home automated from an audio standpoint. And one of the things that we believe strongly at Altispeed Technologies is when we install a piece of technology into your home, especially if it costs a lot of money, we want that piece of technology to last 15, 20, 25, 30 years. And so what you find with a lot of these newer modern smart switches, so to speak, is they rely on an API and they rely on a service. And if the Logitech Harmony is an example, those
don't want that.
Yeah, right. Those things can go bad. And the problem that everyone overlooks, and nobody ever has a good answer. Like when I have this discussion with other people, they never have an answer for me here. There are people that have the money and are willing to put smart light switches that are API-based, service-based in their house one time. They'll spend $15,000, $20,000 to do that once. The problem is when they become outdated.
Sorry, can I interject?
Yeah.
Because so I'm rewiring my entire house.
Right.
It's all opened up.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be using I'm an electrician by trade. So
okay.
I'm going to have this completely rewired. So I'm not going to rely on wireless controls at all.
Let me give you a product to look into. Look into the Lutron Radio Raw system. Now it is wireless. I'll give you that disclaimer. However, it is extremely robust and refined wireless. It's not the wireless like I push a button and then I hope the radio signal gets here or there. And it's specifically designed for electricians and electrical companies to install from an automation standpoint. So all of their training systems, all of the documentation is all written from an electrician's point of view. I think it'd be a really great standpoint. Radio Raw 2 from Lutron. It's a really fantastic product. Very, very high end. You see them a lot in $500,000, $1 million, $2 million houses. And you'll spend a little bit of money, but again, it's one of those systems that it's a completely integrated system, and yet it doesn't rely on anything other than you. You take the piece of software, you program the light switches and the control mechanism and how you want the buttons to work and what you want the lights to do, and then you can tie anything into that. And it's not to say that you can't use smartphone apps or tie it to Alexa or all of those things. You can do all of those things.
Right.
It just means that if any of those APIs ever break,
button controls that are low voltage.
yes. Exactly. And all of the things within the Radio Raw 2 system itself talk it only with their own language. So even if those APIs break, even if the services break, your light switches still work. Your home automation system is not broken. The core infrastructure that you put into your house is solid, it's local, it's yours, you own it, it'll work for 25 years, 50 years, no problem. It just has the flexibility. If you want to tie into other things, you can.
Yeah. And I know you've mentioned Home Assistant on the show. Have you looked into Node-RED? Have you used Node-RED?
No, but I'm making a note of it right now, and I'd love to look into that. Node-RED.
Yeah, because I've been playing with that a little bit and some Arduino boards to do some controls and things. And it actually comes pre-installed on Debian, on Raspbian, I think. On a Raspberry Pi. I'm running it off the Raspberry Pi 3 right now.
Sure.
And it's really sophisticated. It's actually put out by IBM.
Oh, okay.
And, it's a platform that's written in Java or Node.js, I believe, and you can integrate any control and the logic with it. It has logic flows. So it's an incredibly sophisticated platform, but simple at the same time.
Yeah.
Because it has a visual. It has a GUI on it that it serves up as a web page, a local web page, and you log in and you click into that web page, and you can have all your control flows go through that. So I'd like something that could integrate with that because I want to have proximity sensors in the house that can control the lighting on and off and all this, and be able to do it that way. But a lot of these platforms, I use Lutron products all the time, but they're expensive.
Yes.
These lighting panels, these control panels are quite pricey, and I'm looking if I can find maybe a more open source or DIY platform.
Yeah, I don't, honestly, Max, my answer to you is that to a large degree, you get what you pay for. And what you're talking about, you and I look at automation. I can tell just from talking to you for 5 minutes, you and I look at automation very similarly. So a lot of people say, oh, I just love the fact that I can sit on my bed and tell Alexa I'm sorry, I don't mean to keep saying, I know I'm setting everyone's thing up. I'm sorry. Tell the woman in the box that to turn the lights off, and then that happens. That's really convenient. My thought is the box should know when I want the lights to come on and when I want the lights to come off. When I haven't been in the room for 20 minutes or 30 minutes, the box should know that, and it should automatically shut the lights off. And when I walk into a room, there's never a time in my life during nighttime hours where I want to stand in a room in complete darkness and not be able to see anything. That doesn't exist, except my bedroom, because I sleep in there. But other than that, I want if I'm in a room, I want the lights on. And so we have put motion detectors strategically in our house, so there is no place in the house that you can get to other than the bedroom where by the time you even get to the room, the light isn't on. And in fact, it's comical. My mother, she always says, oh, you leave all the lights in your house on. I'm like, no, you don't understand. The lights are only on anytime you're in the room. They just come on because they know you're about to enter the room. And then when you're gone for 10 minutes, then they shut it back off. She goes, no, I've never seen the lights off in any of the rooms. I'm like, I know. That's the point. It's very efficient. So I like it. That's the kind of home automation I'm into. Wendy is calling from Idaho. Hey, well, Wendy, welcome to the Ask Noah Show.
Hello. I've got a couple image questions for you.
Okay, shoot.
So I'm in this photography class, and we're talking about delivering images to, like, a magazine. So the images would need to be delivered in CMYK format.
Okay, yep.
And we'd have to adjust for dot gain. So the problem is I'm using Linux for all of my image workflow. Darktable doesn't handle that. I'm not very comfortable in raw therapy because I've spent most of my time in Darktable.
Sure.
Supposedly, there is an extension for GIMP, but it seems like that's no longer supported, and I'm getting a little frustrated.
Yeah, I bet. So for anyone that doesn't understand what Wendy's question is, what she's saying is that when you are going to go send a professional image off to a company that's going to use it for a professional purpose, they want that image in the highest quality possible, and we divide and we separate and we identify color spaces in different ways. And so you said you're using CYMK?
Yeah, that is what a magazine would need.
Yep. Okay, that makes sense.
And that color profile.
And so here is the answer. The answer is I don't know exactly how to do that in those softwares. However, I know who does. So if it's okay with you, I'm going to put you back on hold, and I'm going to see if I can get him on the show right now. If I can get him to call in or something like that. Let's see here, and if I can, I'll have him answer it for you. If not, what we'll do is I'll take down your information and I'll get back to you. A second to come on the program. So we'll see if I can get him on and we'll answer that question for you. If not, like I said, we'll get back to you. DJ is calling from, I believe, Washington, D.C. Hey, DJ, welcome to the Ask Noah Show.
Hi, Noah. Great to talk to you.
Hey, same, sir. How can we help?
A long-time listener, first-time caller. Hear you since episode 1. I had a follow-up question about the episode 43. Someone was calling in, I think it was Architect, talking about Toybox versus BusyBox.
Yes.
I just wanted to set the record straight that Toybox actually is no longer BSD licensed. So I mean, a lot of the stuff you were saying about it is actually accurate, but like in general, BSD license is not like a total disclaimer of copyright. Just wanted to put that out there, and that I mean, it still has an attribution requirement and all that. So just kind of follow up on open source licensing. Other than that, I mean, if you had any questions, I might be able to answer some if there's any confusion.
Okay.
But I would otherwise just say.
Yeah, off the top of my head, I don't have anything. But yeah, it's thanks for the clarification. I appreciate it. It's one of those things where, and again, we could have a whole discussion on licensing and the benefits and detractors from having a license with like literally no restrictions. Scott is calling. Hey, Scott, welcome to the Ask Noah Show.
Hi, Noah. How are you today?
Excellent. How can we help?
Well, first off, I just wanted to say, your caller 2 callers ago, Wendy, she was saying she was confused by raw therapy. I was confused by it, too, when I tried to open it in the GUI, but the command line interface is much, much easier.
Okay.
So maybe she could try that.
Yeah, let's do that. And I'm going to go ahead and bring Wendy. I'm going to go ahead and bring Wendy back up here, and I'm also going to bring up our Mumble Room. Hey, Mumble guys, how are you?
Hey. Doing great, man.
Hey, I wanted to pick. I was hoping Michael was in here, and I was hoping Michael. Wendy, could you repeat your question for Michael?
So I need to be able to convert an image into CMYK format and be able to adjust .game before sending it off to, say, a magazine client. So it's not something that I have to do now, but it's something that I need to be able to figure out before that is necessary.
Who has an answer for Wendy?
I've never done either of those things.
There's CMYK. There's a plugin for GIMP that you can install the plugin, and it will allow you to convert something to CMYK. You can also use the dev mode of
online, but I haven't been able to get a hold of it.
The easiest thing to do is probably using the dev mode, because if you get the dev mode version of GIMP, it's already built in. The CMYK is built into it. Oh. So if it's just that one purpose, you could use that. You could also try out Krita, because Krita has CMYK support.
So that was going to be my suggestion. I just didn't know enough about it before. But Krita is what you are slowly moving to, right, Michael?
In certain cases, yes. As far as like creating art, right. I use Krita for that.
Does that answer your question, Wendy?
Yeah, I think so. I'll go ahead and look those up and give that a try, and hopefully I'll be able to make those changes.
Okay, and if that doesn't work, Wendy, you give me a call back. We're here every Tuesday. 1-855-450-6624 is the number. The email, live@asknoahshow.com. Give me a call. Become a part of the program. Coming up, Mr. Bob Carver formerly Sunfire, formerly Carver Corporation. Welcome back to the program, Bob.
Well, I feel welcome. Thank you.
Well, good. So, and we have Dr. Chalai here too, don't we?
Yes, I'm here, Bob. Bob, how are you?
How are you guys?
You've taught me everything I know about audio, Bob.
I doubt that.
Well, all right. So let's dig into this a little bit. So, okay, so Bob, we're talking about high resolution audio, and the question has been posed to us: is this snake oil, or is this a legitimate thing for people to enjoy audio? And before I get to any of those questions, before we even talk about it, I just want to get this out on the table because I know this is one thing all three of us are going to agree on. If there's somebody listening to the program right now and they say, "I want to enjoy music. That's what I want to do. I want to sit down, I want to relax, and I want to enjoy music." What is the what do they need? A $5,000 hi-fi audio system with a DAC and $300 or $30,000 Stax headphones or CRM2 cinema ribbons? They need any of that to enjoy music?
Of course not.
No.
But a nice high-resolution, high-fidelity system, there's nothing quite like it. It immerses us in music. We feel it, we experience it, and it's just a delightful thing to have in one's home and to enjoy.
Sure. It's just...
So the yes and no is the answer.
So I just want to make that clear because I think we're all going to agree if what you have access to is a couple of MP3s and some $20 headphones, if that's what you can enjoy music on anything, and you can start training your ears to recognize high quality, low quality. Take a CD. Is going to be vastly superior to even the MP3s you buy on Amazon. So you can start. You don't have to have. It doesn't cost a lot of money to get started enjoying high fidelity audio. That's the first thing I want to say. So Bob. So basically, what I wanted to ask you, and what I wanted to get your take too on, Dr. July, is I want to talk about digital filtering, because digital filtering is improving, but it's not cheap and it's not perfect. And so we can band limit a signal to 20 kilohertz during recording. But we can't do that without the filtering producing some sort of artifacts. And the same is true with band reconstruction filters needed at playback. Because if you think about it, so for anyone that's following this discussion, we talked about what a bit rate is. We talked about, what frequency is, stuff like that. If we need to use a filter, we need to attenuate that signal down 96 dBs, which leaves us a playroom of 2.04 kilohertz at 16 bit depths of resolution, because we have 44, we sample at 44.1 kilohertz, and we have to have 40 kilohertz to have a 20 kilohertz band limited signal, if everyone's with me so far. So we've got 2 kilohertz to play with, basically.
Well, that's the leftover bandwidth that gives us a little extra room.
Mm-hmm.
But remember, in music, in normal music, the signal at 20 kilohertz is at best down minus 20 dB anyway. So a very, very slow roll-off filter will work in the recording process, although generally a very steep roll-off filter is used.
Right.
And incidentally, we hear a lot of bad things about filters. And when I designed and built my first compact disc player years and years ago, the first thing I had to determine for myself was whether a filter, a brick wall, as it were, filter at 22 kilohertz was audible and would hurt the sound. And what I found is that a properly designed brick wall filter will not harm the sound at all, and is in fact, when it's inserted into the signal path, is not detectable.
Now, is this an analog filter or a digital filter?
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't.
I did it. I made an analog. Yeah, I made an analog filter because it was easy to do. This was some 25 years ago.
Sure.
And if you think for a moment, we have a brick wall filter in our own hearing mechanism, and it is steep. It is really steep. And it begins, for a young person, at about 22 kilohertz anyway. It's a well-designed filter is undetectable. Now, if it's a poorly designed filter and produces artifacts inside the audio band, yes, you can detect it.
Go ahead, Dr. Chile.
So, no, I just want to interject one thing. Noah, did you understand what he was talking about? We have a built-in brick wall filter. He's talking about our ears.
Right, of course.
Okay.
Continue,
go ahead,
Bob. Good.
Bob, please.
And one more thing that's interesting. If you have a brick wall filter, and suppose you apply a square wave to it, or a triangle wave, or anything like that, and insert such a filter, it'll immediately turn that square wave or triangle wave into a sine wave. And it turns out that if you apply another filter in Cascade, and a third one in Cascade with that, it doesn't change it one iota, except for the delay. But it still looks like the same exact sine wave, and it sounds the same. So cascaded filters don't do anything. It's the first one that matters.
So whether or not we can hear artifacts is somewhat subjective, right? Because we have various playback equipment. You know, a lot of people just aren't going to have the money for a playback equipment that would even produce the signal, interpret the signal. But then even above that, our hearing is so subjective. You know, what is our hearing peak around like 8 years old or 9 years old or something like that? And then our ability to hear higher frequency sounds just goes down and down and down after that. But if we look at a pulse wave on a scope, we can see pre and post echoes. Now, the post echo we can dismiss. That's not really relevant because post echoes occur in real life all the time. But pre echoes, the idea that you can hear an artifact of a signal before the signal has actually happened, that only exists in the digital realm, because in real life we can't hear a sound before, or any part of the sound before the sound itself has occurred. So I guess my point is, or my question rather, is the Nyquist theory holds water in theory, but my question is, can we actually properly implement it with today's technology? I guess your answer is yes.
Absolutely. Oh, we can. And even though it looks as if there's a signal somehow, a pre-echo,
yeah,
that doesn't exist. That doesn't exist. That only exists on the face of an oscilloscope.
Oh, okay. So
obviously, something can occur before it happens. Before the impulse happens, there's nothing coming out.
Interesting.
What you see is a slight delay, and that's where you see the pre-echo. Then you see the main signal, and then a post-echo. But if you time align everything, that pre-echo begins at the same time the pulse arrives, not before and not after. And you can't hear it anyway. So the reason you can't hear it is for the reason I just said a minute ago. We have a filter in our hearing mechanism.
Sure.
And once you have a filter, you can cascade as many as you want and nothing changes.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. Because the bottleneck is in our ears itself.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, that's a good way of looking at it.
So would it be your opinion then that 44.1 kilohertz at 16 bits is more than enough to accurately reproduce anything our hearers could ever hear?
That's correct. And it's not my opinion. It's a real
science.
Fact.
Yeah, right.
It's measurable. Yeah,
right.
It's measurable.
So
that's only on playback for the recording process.
Mm-hmm.
And for the recording process, it's much better to have some extra room. So 24 bits is better than 16. And remember this: a 16-bit signal with dither looks perfect.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like a perfect sine wave. It looks analog as it can be. And the only thing you see that's not perfect is the noise. And the noise sounds like Gaussian noise. It sounds like a hiss.
Mm-hmm.
It's a normal, actually sort of sounds, believe it or not, like tape hiss. And if you reduce the bit depth from 16 to 10 to 12 to 8, the sine wave stays perfect. The signal to noise changes. The distortion stays low if it's dithered. That's a requirement. But only thing that changes is the noise floor goes up. It's as if you have a tape that's moving at a slow speed.
So, excuse my ignorance for a second. What is the advantage if 44.1 kilohertz and 16-bit depth is enough for playback? What's the advantage in recording? Is it just to catch all of the little artifacts that we can't hear, just to have them?
No. It's because when you're making a tape, when you're making a recording, you have music playing and you have dials, and you have headroom limitations that you have to pay attention to. And it's really a pain to watch it that closely just to see that you're not overloading anything.
Sure.
So that's why 24 bits gives you a much larger overload range that you can work with, so you don't have to worry about it. When you're making a recording, you have to pay attention to the musicians, the music, the microphones. One thing you don't want to be paying attention to is whether you're overloading your recorder.
Yeah, sure.
Or your tape. So that's why it's nicer to have 24 bits.
You know, and that's would you agree with the statement? I would assert that it's even twice as important when we're talking about digital recording, because analog clipping, it's kind of artistic almost. It almost has an artistic quality to it. Yeah. Digital clip, just there's nothing musical about it.
That's right. It sounds terrible. And a good recording engineer will always, even if he's recording digitally, he'll have a nice analog limiter somewhere in the system, or a digital limiter that behaves as if it were an analog limiter.
Yeah, we record this show with 10 dB of headroom just for that reason, just because I don't want any possibility of a digital clip ever, no matter what's going on. Let me ask you this, Bob. Right. Let me ask you this, and I guess this is kind of a subjective question. If the answer is just you're a fool, I'll accept that. But the first time I listened to DSD audio, 1-bit audio sampled at 2.8 megahertz, and I put headphones on, a pair of Beyerdynamics DT770s, and I put it on, and I'm telling you, it very clearly sounded sweeter, cleaner, crisper to me than a wave recording. Is that just is my mind just playing tricks on me? Is that what that is?
I couldn't say right now. I mean, heavens, I'm 2,000 miles away. Yeah. I don't know what happened.
Sure.
But it could be. But whenever that does happen, it behooves you as a scientist to find out why and what's going on.
Right.
And you can do a series of converging experiments. Experiments, the results of which will teach you what actually has happened. But, oh, man, in audio, it is so easy to sit down in front of a pair of speakers or put on a pair of headphones and go, wow, this blows away everything I heard before.
Right.
And often it's true enough, but there's always a reason. There's always a good reason, and what I like about good reasons that are ferreted out is they never fly in the face of logic or science, even though it seems as if it is flying in the face of science and logic.
Yeah, I mean,
that's the nature of our hobby.
That's one thing that all three of us have in common, is I think all of us accept that there are certain scientific principles that stand true. And I'm not saying that Nyquist theorem is wrong. I had some speculations on why this might sound a little bit better, and I guess what I'm learning is that those are incorrect. But so I guess my next question is, when are you coming to Grand Forks and we're going to sit down and do an A/B comparison? We're going to figure this thing out.
Oh, that would be fun. It's always fun to do those experiments. I did it a long time ago, but you know what? It needs to be done every 10 years, whether I need to do it or not.
I agree.
It's always fun to, and so I'm coming to Grand Forks soon. I'm not sure when, but it won't be much. It won't be long. It'll be probably right after the beginning of.
And then we can do that. We can do this on air, right? We're going to do this whole experiment on air.
Oh, that would be a lot of fun. We can build a little circuit and then try it out and report the results.
Hey, Bob, I have a couple of questions before I let you go. Bob, I have a couple of questions for you. Number one, the first question is, yes, I accept all your statements as face value, but I have a question for you. All those statements are predicated on the fact that all the systems are working as designed, correct?
Yes.
So, is it possible that some of the sound is it possible sometimes we don't hear the best sound because maybe all the systems are not working as designed?
Oh, absolutely.
In other words, the sound that Noah heard, maybe it was so well designed, the filters and everything, so it was working as designed, whereas the other system that he heard, maybe they weren't all properly tuned and properly calibrated, so maybe they weren't working perfectly.
Of course, and there's no way to tell from here.
All right. Well,
look and see.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much for your time, Bob. If people want to follow what you're doing, what you're up to, where can they go?
To my website.
Sure.
Go to my website.
Yeah, sure.
Bob Carver, or read reviews, stuff like that.
No, Bob, which is your website, Bob?
No, I'm old. I've been around for a long time, and there's a lot of my body of work.
Where do you direct people nowadays? Is it bobcarver.com?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, if you just type in Bob Carver and Google it, I'll come up.
All right. Well, sounds good. Well, thank you very much for coming back on the Ask Noah show. We look forward to having you back on the program real soon.
Oh, that'll be fun, and it'll be a fun experiment to do and to share with your listeners.
All right, that's great. All right, great. Thanks for coming on. We'll have Bob in studio. We're going to do this experiment because I still think there's something to this DSD audio. I don't have the expertise like Bob does to be able to tell you exactly what it is. Go ahead.
No, as I pointed out, it's quite possible that many of the systems that currently exist are, the theory behind they're correct, but maybe they are not properly executed.
Yeah, it could be. It's the same system though. I was just listening to the difference between a WAV recording and a DSD file. Anyway, here's the thing. If you want to get in on this, what you need to do to listen to this audio on your computer, because you can't just plug in headphones to your Apple iEars or whatever and listen to DSD files on your your iPhone or whatever. You have to have a special device that converts the high resolution audio back into analog that your ear that can then play to your headphones. And so what you need is what we call a DAC, a DAC, a digital audio converter. We've got my favorite one. It works on Linux natively. It's made by a company called Cambridge. I know, Dr. Chalai, you're familiar with them. That's the DAC Magic 100, small little USB audio interface. Works great. And then you need a good set of cans or speakers to listen on. And so we have linked in the show notes a couple different options for you. I've been playing with the Beyerdynamics DT770 80 ohm headphones. If you got a bit of cash to burn, those are some decent headphones. But we'll also have some really inexpensive headphones. They're made by Monoprice, the 8323s, and I mean, these things are an incredible buy. They have the sound of $150 or $200 pair of headphones, and Monoprice is selling them for $16 somehow. And I mean, you really, really get a terrific bang for your buck if you buy these headphones. So check them out. We'll have them linked in the show notes. Both of those are available for you in the show notes, as well as software you're going to need to play the DSD files. I've been using a program called Dead Beef. On Linux, we come up with these crazy names. It's available on the RJUR, as well as we'll have a PPA for Ubuntu. Again, linked in the show notes for you. Phone lines 855-450-NOAH, 855-450-6624. The email live at AskNoahShow.com. Jared joins us from New Mexico. Hey, Jared, welcome to the Ask Noah Show.
Hello, how are you?
Excellent. How can we help?
So I wanted to ask a question about, I guess, the next 30 to 50 years. I'm planning on going back to college. I just don't know if system administrator is something I wanted to do as a full-time career. Mostly I see computers being able to repair themselves in a way that I don't know if I spend the time now to go to school for this, if I'll regret it in the future.
No.
And there's also other careers as InfoSec, other things like that. Go ahead and tell me your opinion, though.
Yeah, no, I don't think you're wasting your time at all. I think the thing to remember anytime you want to go get education is you want to look at the return on your investment. So if you're going to spend $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 on an education, what are you getting for that? Because if you get out of school, $50,000, you spent $50,000 to go to school, and then you get out of school and you go get a job for $35,000, that wasn't a real great investment, right? So what you want to look at, you want to have a plan laid out ahead of time. We always recommend that you pay cash for things as you go along. But when you go along and you start looking at companies, and what company would you like to work for? Would you like to work for Google, or would you like to work for Red Hat, or would you like to start your own business, or would you like to work for a small mom and pop shop? Figure that out first and then make your education path. So say, for example, you want to work at Red Hat. Pretty straightforward. You can go and ask them, what kind of education requirements do you have? And they'll tell you, well, we want a 4-year degree, we want to see 5 years of relevant work experience, and we want to see a fleshed out GitHub page. Well, there you go. You want to work for Google, chances are you're going to need to intern there or work for another company or come out of college, with a lot of with high marks, and so those kinds of things. One thing that we see in the IT career, or in the IT field, is when I interview people to work for Altispeed, I rarely care about formal education. I met some really smart people that don't have a high school education, and I have other people that have more degrees than a thermometer, and they can't problem solve their way out of a paper bag. So formal education to me means,
seriously.
Yeah, I mean, it means almost nothing. Some of the smartest people in the world don't have a formal education, and that doesn't make them. That makes sometimes they're some of the best technicians. And so what we look at is two things. One is relevant work experience. Have they done what we're asking them to do in the past? Two is I can suss out pretty quick in an interview how that person is willing to take direction. And a moldable person, it's much easier to redirect a thoroughbred running the right direction than it is to try to get a donkey to run a race, if that makes any sense. I can suss that out in an interview pretty quick. But the other thing I look for is certifications. If somebody comes in, they say they have a Red Hat certification, they're certified system administrator. Because I have taken the certified administrator test, I know that means that particular person can problem solve IT problems, the very kind of problems that we're going to have no problem. And if they come in and say, well, I have Cisco CCNA, well, I know they're really good at subnetting because that's basically the entire test is subnetting. And so, and I take those credentials for what they're worth. So what I would recommend if you want to go down the path of system administrator, first, I would look at maybe taking some certification classes. And then the second thing I would do is look at getting some relevant work experience. So go volunteer or go help out as a junior system admin somewhere. And that should get you started. Again, phone lines 1-855-450-NOAH. That's 1-855-450-6624. The email live@asknoahshow.com. So we are doing our bracket elimination challenge. And the bracket elimination challenge is basically where we are trying to pick the best Linux distro for a given job. Now, this week's results surprised me. We pitted Ubuntu against Fedora. And this week, it is Fedora. Fedora winning at 1,563 votes versus 1,185 votes. And I was really shocked by this. I thought for sure Ubuntu was going to come out ahead to begin with. And so if you want to vote, Fedora won this round. There's nothing we can do. They won fair and square. In fact, I was talking about perhaps calling it a tie if it was real close, and then the Fedora guys just pulled it ahead. And that's despite some cheating from a certain someone that was posting in an Ubuntu thread. But yeah, the vote is won, and Fedora won that round. And so Ubuntu will still be listed on the site, and there will still be a list of all the people that the number of votes and why those people voted for those things. But unfortunately, Fedora continues on. Ubuntu does not. Now this week, because last week we got you all riled up, we're going to rile you up again with Arch Linux versus Debian. Arch Linux, the design of the approach of the development teams follows the KISS, keep it simple, stupid, as a general guideline and focuses on elegance, code correctness, minimalism, simplicity, and expects the user to be willing to make some minor efforts to understand the system's operation. All that in English. It's a rolling Linux distro where everything is completely fresh and it's kind of a hodgepodge of every package that's available. You can just install it and have it available to you. That's compared with Debian. The Debian project was first announced in 1993 by Ian Murdoch. Debian 0.01 was released on September 15th of 93, and the first stable release was made in 1996. Debian is probably one of the most popular Linux distros ever to grace us with its presence. There are still plenty of people that are using it, and it is the common base for multiple other distributions like Ubuntu and Elementary, and Elementary based off of Ubuntu, based off of Debian. So a lot of things have their roots in Debian. So I expect whatever we got attention last week, I expect to get more attention next week. And you can vote on that, asknoahshow.com/elimination. Let us know what you think, which operating system do you think is a better choice? And again, it doesn't have to be the one that you would personally use. It just has to be between those two. If you were on an island and those were your two choices, what would you choose? asknoah.com/elimination. Hey guys, can you help us make the Ask Noah Show better? We would really appreciate it. If you are the kind of person that skips over episodes because they don't look interesting, do you like the in-depth explanations like we had this hour? Do you like the stuff that's slightly outside of Linux like we had this hour? I want you to be as harsh and mean as you want. Just be truthful. That's all I'm asking for, is the truth. How can we serve you better? Should we have more guests? Should we have more calls? Should we do more video content? Should we focus more on mobile content like notes and links and timestamps on your phone? Would you like a streaming app so you could stream the show live from your phone? What kind of things could we do to engage your listenership in the Ask Noah Show? We want to know. Head over to asknoahshow.com/better to make the show better. asknoahshow.com/better. We would love to hear from you, because you guys, and this, what I'm really looking for is the people who don't like the show. If you don't like the show, I would love to know why. And I would be so grateful if you could just take 2 minutes. We don't even ask for your name. There's literally one question on the form, and it is, what can we do to make the show better? asknoahshow.com/better. How can we make it better? And if you could give me just 2 minutes of your time and just tell me, what would it take for you to listen to the show? I would love to know. Dr. July, thanks so much for being here with me this hour.
Oh, you are very welcome. Glad to join you, Noah.
So I understand, over the past year or so, 2 years or so, you've been working on a project that's finally coming to fruition, and you are doing a weekly show now where you're talking about how people can improve their lives without traditional medicine.
That is correct.
So that's pretty cool. So instead of having to and you're a medically trained physician, you have 35 years of invasive cardiac procedures, and you know when that's appropriate. But you also know that there's a time where people can just change their diet, change their lifestyle, and they can cure 85% or more of their diseases.
Chronic illnesses without pills. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, mm-hmm. and that happens when? Tomorrow?
Tomorrow, I do it my show every Wednesday around 6:00. But tomorrow I'm going to talk about this opioid crisis that everybody's talking about, and I'm going to take your questions tomorrow.
Yeah, you're going to follow up on the symposium that the radio station aired last week, all right?
That is correct.
That's cool. Correct. All right. Well, we'll have more information on that in the show notes as well. Thanks again for joining me. I appreciate having you. Again, the Ask Noah show continues next week. Let's see here. We are on Tuesdays now. I keep losing this stuff. But yeah, the Ask Noah show continues next Tuesday at 6 p.m. Central. Huge thanks to Ben, our producer, Sarah, our call screener, and Vox Telsis for providing our phone system. We'll hand you off to the Harm Reduction Report coming up next on the all-new Independent Talk KEQQ 88.3 FM in Grand Forks. Well, thanks again. I appreciate you being here. Did you leave on me? He left. Hey, Mumble guys, how are you?
Hey. Pretty good.
Thank you guys for being here.
I gotta say, as an audio engineer for a living, this episode was invaluable for me to listen to and be here for.
Oh, good.
Amen.
I'm glad you think. I'm glad you. So that wasn't too far outside the stretch of Linux, because I lost sleep over it. And that's not an exaggeration.
No, not. It's not outside of Linux at all, because there's so much audio engineering stuff that you can do with Linux. For instance, I'm using the Fedora Jam Spin, and there's all sorts of different EQs and effects that you can get and install and make to make music, and really speaking even better. In fact, I'm running my microphone right now through a gate, a compressor, an EQ, so on and so forth.
Okay, cool. What are you using? You using like a 286S or?
286. That plugins. It's really the CAV plugins.
Oh, okay, I see. It's going into like a DAW, and then you've got some plugins that are
actually no. I don't have it going into a DAW. I have it going into Carla. Are you familiar with that?
No, tell me about it.
Okay, so it's basically a virtual rack, virtual live production rack. So you can put all the productions, like the CAV plugins, really any LV2 or VST plugins, and you can run them as individual processes from this, and Jack sees everything, and you can patch it in and make it flow exactly the way you need it to in a live production setting.
Huh, interesting.
Have you ever heard of Waves, like Waves Sound Grid or anything like that?
Yeah.
It's basically like that, but free and open source. Actually, Waves kind of is too, but yeah, this is a much different way of doing it, and equivalent if you ask me, because there's a lot of eyeballs on the code.
Yeah. That's the advantage of open source. Yeah, I was actually kind of disappointed I didn't get to jump in there with the LUP discussion. Two things bit me simultaneously. One, I didn't realize that nobody was monitoring the IRC, and the second thing was I didn't realize that my microphone was muted. So when I tried to interject a conversation, it was like it wasn't happening. Oh well. Live and learn.
Yep. JJ had some questions, I guess.
Well, I mean, I would probably wait till next week or any other week after. It's no big deal.
Yeah. What is the end show command? Is it not just end show? I thought it was end show.
Isn't it bang end show?
Yeah, that's what I thought. It's not working though. Bang end show.
Break high!
Hey, no, I've got some feedback about the high quality stuff you were talking about.
Yeah, please.
So I did an audio engineering degree for a year, and the issues I had at that campus. But what I noticed was there was a trend with two groups of people in audio: the analog gear people and the digital and door in the box crowd. And so the digital in the box door type people would use a digital analog digital mixer that actually recorded in a higher quality, because 9 times out of 10 they were using a PC. So they weren't using Firewire, they were using USB 2, 3 or Thunderbolt. They were able to record in 96K